The Edmonton Oilers are hoping to contend yet again, but can they get that last step under their belts? Nick Zararis is here to talk about all things Oilers as the Locked On NHL 2023-2024 season preview continues. Gil Martin here. The NHL season is less than a week away, and Locked On season preview coverage continues as we welcome in Nick Zararis to talk about all things Edmonton Oilers ahead of the 2023-2024 season. Nick, thanks for stopping by and doing this. What is the biggest storyline surrounding the Oilers coming into this new season?
If they're finally going to get over the hump, over the last couple of years, they've slowly but surely rooted out some of the weaker links of their team. They've done a really solid job of putting a quality group of supporting characters around their superstars. Any team that features a Connor McDavid and a Leon Draisaitl, they'll make the playoffs, but that's not the goal anymore. The goal is deep, prolonged playoff runs, and to do that, you can't really have any weak links. They've made some deep runs. They've made the second round twice with Connor McDavid. They've made a conference final once. So for them, it's really just a matter of getting to the top of that mountain, whether that's winning a Stanley Cup or making a cup final. That's the goal coming in.
And what was the Oilers' most significant move this offseason and why?
It was getting Evan Bouchard on a bridge deal. There was conjecture early in the summer that maybe it would have been more beneficial to both parties to get him under contract long-term and have him in your long-term plans. But for the Oilers, who are really trying to maximize the next 2 seasons, it is better to have the extra cap space that you would have, that $2-3 million you would have of Bouchard on a bridge deal at like $4.5 million versus like the 6 to 7 it would have taken to get him long term, because that's another roster player or two on a team that's trying to get every last bit out of its lineup. So for now, you've got an ascending talent under contract for the next 2 years, and 2 years from now, you hope when the salary cap is probably gone up because hockey revenue has gone up, you're in better shape to take care of him for a 6 or 7 year deal as a 24 or 25-year-old.
All right, calculated gamble there by the Oilers. Who figures to be the most important player on the Oilers this season, and what makes them so critical to the team's success?
So I have a 2-part answer for you. Number one, it's Connor McDavid. That's the best player in the world. Any team that features the best player in the world, he's going to be the most important component to their team. But you don't really worry about McDavid beyond injury, and even injury, you can't really worry about that. You can't forecast it, predict it. You can do everything you can to protect against it, but if that happens, you have to find a way to adapt. The more complex answer, and frankly the more interesting answer, is the goaltending situation, because they went into last season where they gave Jack Campbell a long-term deal as a free agent to be the starter, and he lost the job by, I would say, the end of November, and Stuart Skinner usurped him. He was an all-star last year. He was a Calder finalist last year. He had a really strong season, and then when the playoffs came, Skinner really struggled. Campbell relieved him a couple of times in that series against the Kings. And then by the time they got to that second round series, Skinner was really out of gas. Campbell was really tired. And that was the most games Stuart Skinner had played in a season since, I want to say, 2015, 2016, when he was like 16 or 17 years old as a junior hockey player. So the physical wall the goalies hit, especially the young ones who haven't made 40, 50 starts in a long time, it really came for the Oilers last year. And that's not to say you don't want to ride your best goalie. That's what Stuart Skinner was for them last year. But you need to balance the short term, we need to win this game, versus we're trying to win a Stanley Cup. So there's a real balance the Oilers need to find this season with their goaltending.
How about some of the youngsters, a potential breakout candidate that people should be aware of?
So Dylan Holloway, somebody who played 50-something games for them last year, only 9 points, not a ton to write home about, but this is the one guy who still really doesn't have a track record of anybody who's going to make the team. Of the guys who are more than likely going to make the opening night roster, this is the youngest player on the entire team that's probably going to make the team. So nobody else really fits that mold of outbreak. If you wanted to say Evan Bouchard maybe goes from what he is right now to maybe being on the fringe of the Norris conversation, sure, but I think Dylan Holloway fits that bill a little bit more. Somebody who might be able to crack that top 9, get some of the trickle-down points that everybody manages to put up in the Oilers, where you talk about guys on that second and third line getting into the 50s and 60s just because of how much talent is on that team.
Makes sense. What would a successful season look like for the Oilers, and what's at stake if that's not achieved?
The goal is a Stanley Cup here. They realistically are going to have the best path they would have. Vegas already winning their Stanley Cup, that helps them. That's not to say Vegas isn't going to try, but human nature will creep in at some point for Vegas, where they'll just be content to get in the playoffs and see what happens, kind of what you've seen in Tampa the last couple of years. And as far as the stakes, the bigger picture, we're 2 years away from Leon Draisaitl being a free agent. We're 3 years away from Connor McDavid being a free agent. That's really what's at stake here. You don't need to win the Stanley Cup this year, but you need to have a real signal to those guys that even if we don't win this year, we're getting closer than we were last year, and we want you to stay here, and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure we can win you guys that championship.
All right. Well, it's Stanley Cup or bust in Edmonton. Nick, thank you so much for doing this. For more on the Oilers, be sure to follow Locked On Oilers on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And check out the season previews for all 32 teams across the Locked On NHL channel, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.